was afraid about the scrutination will be happening today.
Afraid about what?
The scrutination, like the hard words.
Yeah.
Because definitely you need to start talking about how they just dumped API design into us, and we don't have an idea. Besides, oh, we have idea. No, I don't have any idea of what's going on with this lecture. I am able to do anything, but I don't have any idea. I don't even heard to something related to API design. So it's supposed for us to just come up with API design with this. Like we can find some doubts about requires something earlier, requires something in the server, why, what means the execution of the object.
Okay, let's talk about it. Cool. So first things first, we gave you guys this is heavy, all right? Okay, so I see. So Julian's got a comment that came in. It said it would be cool if we just going over the reference part, like the first post example. Okay, so let's talk about that. If we look, okay, so but first let's start at the very beginning with MVC architecture. What is this thing? What is MVC architecture? Okay, so we basically take out our we take out our concerns for what our data is trying to do, and we separate them into different files. The reason for that is because as your application grows, you can grow along with it, and you have a separate place for all of your models, so like your database schema, and then the models that are assigned with that, and then you have a separate place for all of your logic to exist with querying your data, querying the database, saving stuff to the database, and that's called your controllers. And then you have your views, which is like where we view this stuff at, like where we bind it all together. That's in the routes file, okay? So for this case, we don't have very many routes, so we didn't need to implement multiple route files. Normally you'll have like, and there's lots of different like ways to look at architecture. So if I'm gonna get rid of my, what is it? No, it's Command K, sorry. Oh, I know what it is. There it is. Okay. So I was in my like full browser mode, and I didn't want to like screw anything up. So if you look at our design, we have controllers, we have models, and we have routes. Okay. All of our routes are just going to exist in here, and you see our routes are just a function.
Could you share your screen?
Oh no, not
please,
a chance.
Pretty please.
Okay. So our routes are simply just a function. Okay. Right here, this is just a Lambda function, and it just takes your server, okay? So when we call this, if you look at server.js, we call it down here, and we say, okay, everything that's a route, so routes is, we're passing in here, everything that's a route, everything that we pass to this function is just gonna live on our server. It's gonna live on our Express server, okay? So back over to our routes, you see we pass our server to our function here. So now we can register all of our routes into one single place. So it just keeps everything in the same file. And since all of this stuff is doing is just calling your route and registering the location where you're going to access the data, then all you need to do is just reference and dot chain all of your methods to it. So all of your CRUD operations, which for this is mostly just post operations here. And so we have like a new user, so that's going to go and create a user, a login that's going to be a post on that login, because we need to take some data, compare it, contrast it, and send it back. Okay, and so all we did was basically just send everything through this routes file. This is where we register our views. Okay, and then if you look at your controllers now, so if we go and look at our user controllers, all we have are two methods that we name ourselves. These are just two methods that we use that support our functioning. Okay, so we have a find one method that's going to go and just look for that user object. Now, this isn't really doing much password checking or any validation, Normally what you would want to do is basically compare if user, so the user you get back from the find one function, which is why I'm passing it in this exec, because it's using, I can use exec here and just simply pass it a callback. And that's all exec, can take. I mean, you could call it and you could .benify it if you needed to, but you don't need to do that in this case. We just pass it a single callback. And that callback is going to be executed once exec finishes operations. So it's going to give us back an error. This callback will be hit. It's going to give us back a user or whatever we want to call it. And now you could do like if, user dot name or user dot password does not, you could do your checking there. Or if you didn't want to do it there, you'd have to query for the user anyway. So you'd want to find the user. So you say user.find.password. Is it the same as user.password? And then pass that error response back. So I'm not really doing anything crazy here other than just passing it the user to find, and which has the username and password on it, and just sends it forward. Okay. So if both of these things match, if they're the same thing, then it's going to send it forward and move on. Otherwise, we'll get an error. But there's not very good password checking on this error right here. And this could be error or error message or whatever. It's not very good password checking at that point. But don't worry about that for this sprint. If you do get good password checking and checking on that particular spot, that's awesome. That's a bonus, and that's going to set you up for our next lab, which is on client and server-side authentication and how we handle that process. So for this point, all we did is have a save user and a get user on login. So very, very straightforward. So that's it for the controllers. And then the model for this is very simple. It's a username and a password. Both are required. Username's unique. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Just going to make sure. Zach, we're good for now. Okay. Questions to this point?
Right.
Yes.
Man, as I told you in the private, and basically, I already have a knowledge about it. I don't see a good lecture, the last lecture. I mean, I can get anything. Okay. Now you are passing the answer, so that means we are not able to do this, or something like this. Basically, I think we should talk about what happened and how happened yesterday's lecture, because that is why I'm trying to talk to you guys, and that's why it's very weird. I mean, things are not making sense,
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Let's build this all from scratch, and let's just do it real quick. Okay. So if I were to actually let's just leave this alone, and let me create a new instance of this application. All right. So I'm not sure exactly where the hangup is, because I mean a lot of people were struggling with some environment issues, struggling to get the project off the ground.
Ryan.
Yes.
Hey. The struggle is the lesson yesterday. The lecture yesterday showed a lot of error, as always Sean does. I wish Sean was here. I told him in private that he could use me as a test user, but the thing is, the lecture yesterday, and I hope you watched the video, was worse. Wasn't work. We got a lot of things wrong in this lecture, and I will keep pressing this key until somebody look at this. Because I know how to do this. I can do this without the lecture.
Okay. So, but Alon, I'm just going to stop you right there, because there's no reason to dwell on the past when I'm here to fix the problem at the present. So there's no reason to start rehashing all of this stuff and say, oh, there was a big problem yesterday. That's exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm already going over some of this stuff. So I'm going to be teaching this right now. So if you just give me 1 minute to get all set up, I can actually go through this and get everything set up the way that we should. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
No. Don't need to be sorry. I'm just trying to be stern so we can get to the point and make sure that we have a really good use of our time right now, because we only have another 20 minutes left. And thank you for stopping me, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the feedback. So let's move forward. Let me just kill off everything that I had running. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to put this. All right. Okay, so regardless of where you're at, this will probably help you guys all out. So if we look at what we're doing here in the README, we have 2 folders that we need to install some packages on. We have a client folder and then the root folder. So let's do that real quick. Mongo's gonna okay. Running Zoom and npm install, or like yarn install at the same time, is like just blowing my fan up. So my processing is getting pretty heavy right now. Okay, so yarn start. That's gonna pull up our yarn server, our little Webpack dev server, okay? And then if I go back into the application, I start a new process over here, and okay, I'm at the root, so I can say yarn start here as well. Server up and running. Okay, we've got some deprecation stuff, but don't worry too much about that. Oh, and we're not handling our Mongo server, so. Great. So this should look a little better. Okay, so starting in our server file, you don't need to worry about all this stuff. We're going to be explaining a lot more of this as we go on. You already know this line, though. This is an important line to understand. We're just saving all of our posts to a blog post database, okay? And then we're using body parser like normal. We're using a little bit different stuff because, actually, we probably don't even need that middleware. And then we're using Chorus to doing some cross-site scripting. We're sending requests from localhost 3000. So we're saying just allow any of this stuff to happen. So I'm just saying, whenever we process any HTTP requests from React, we want to allow it all to happen, okay? And then with this line is the biggest thing you need to understand from what's different right now, is that we're defining a variable called routes and pulling those routes in, okay, from a routes file, and then we're calling that function, okay, and passing it our server. So then we can go into our API and we can create our routes, okay? So the first thing that we need to create are some routes right here, right? And those routes, we're just gonna create them, and then we're gonna basically be able to pass controllers to them in this way. And controllers, all they are just like things that interact with your database. So let me give you a little direction here on what I'm getting at with this. Now this isn't the one solution to all of this, okay? What we're talking about is MVC architecture. You have your models, which interact with your database, okay? With your views that interact with the client, or how the client accesses all this stuff. Here's a little computer for the client. And then your controllers that simply bind the two, okay? So it's like so our routes are our views, okay, in this case. And when we hit HTTP, whatever, we're expecting some sort of data to be passed to that, if it's like a post, a patch, a put, or delete. we're expecting to use like request parameters or something, you know, request body objects, anything like that. And then we use the logic inside of our controllers to validate, well, we can do validation on both sides. So to validate the request, okay, to handle your request and your response, okay? And then the models simply build us a blueprint of what our data needs to look like inside of Mongo. Okay, so that's where you do your schema, okay? That's where you also call mongoose.models, which is very important to understand at this point. If you're not really sure what's going on with mongoose.models, please let me know and I'll help you understand that, okay? So basically you're just creating with these schema, these models, a blueprint for how your data needs to look and what it needs to do to be saved. Your views are the routes that give the computer access to that data. And we use HTTP, HTTP to process those requests. And then the controllers bind everything. So the controllers are where all your major logic is going to happen for this sprint. Everything else is new in the sense that it's giving you it's giving you sort of an abstracted paradigm. We're taking away our concerns out of one server.js file and we're throwing them into 3 different files essentially. And essentially more files because we have more things that we can abstract away. So that way it keeps it really, really clean and really clear. Right, so, okay, so I'm checking Slack right now. Cool. All right, we got the little diagram, everything's good to go. Hopefully it makes a little bit more sense as to why we're doing what we're doing. Well, I haven't told you why we're doing it. We're doing it to keep things organized, and we're doing it because it's very common. You see paradigms like this all over the place. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have like one single controller file. It doesn't mean it's going to be architected exactly this way, but this is common enough, like for this application that we're using it in this way. So let's talk about our routes. So we have, if you look at the README, so I explained that we have all of these endpoints being hit. Now I know there's some bugs on the client that I need to go iron out, and as they come up, I'll let you guys know exactly what those are if you haven't discovered them and fixed them yourself, which would be awesome. That's like super mega points for your Hogwarts house of choice if you found that. But we'll need to implement the following routes, models, and controllers in order for things to start to come together. You'll want to start with the models. You'll have a user schema and a post schema to implement. So let's just concern ourselves with this particular spot with the user schema. So every single user schema we work with requires Mongoose. There's an awesome thunderstorm rolling in. So this is like epic. It's like intense coding, live coding, and then thunder in the background, and lightning. So, and then const schema, and this is me just abstracting this away. So mongoose.schema. You don't have to do this. You can, I just like to reassign this variable here. So when I say const user schema, I don't have to call mongoose.schema every single time. Just little tips of the trade. But when we module.exports this, so when we're going to pull this out and use it, equals mongoose.models, okay? Not that. There's a difference between module and models, okay? And what we pass here is user and then the user schema. Okay, so I've said this a couple of times. I've made a few key comments about this piece right here. Mongoose knows to take singular user and uppercase user and turn it into a collection called lowercase users in the blog post database. So we'll say this is blog posts, this is collections. So that's now our model. We have a model called users. And yes, it'll do it with everything. And what's really crazy about this, and I still haven't like verified this, so maybe if somebody wants to try this later on and correct me if I'm totally wrong, I've seen this happen, and Mongoose will return lowercase people, which is absolutely awesome because it knows that persons is not like that. Cool. Octopus, yeah, I should try, but for intensive fluidity in this, let's just not confuse and let's just move forward, and then maybe I'll try later as like a bonus ball for this stuff. Okay, so this is stuff that you guys have been exposed to. You've been doing it for a week and a half, so none of this should be new at this point. It should just be reinforcing some of these topics. Okay, give me my mouse back. Okay, here we go. So we have a couple of things on user. We are concerned about a username. Type, string, required, it's true. And we're going to say it's unique. The reason it's unique is because that is how users work. If you don't have a system that can uniqueify your users by their emails or their username, then you have a broken system. But then we have a password, and it's a type string. It as well is required. It's not unique. Passwords do not have to be unique. Okay? So this new structure is supposed to be loaded asynchronously directly in the server. So yes, this stuff gets registered as we pass our route to the server. So it's like, we could have taken Express out of our server.js file and simply just put it right in here and defined everything, but like it just cleans it up so much to just pass it to the server. It's not necessarily, it's doing it at compilation time, so it'll register all these things. So it's not even a question of being asynchronous. These things, the asynchronous nature is when you send a request and get a response, because that request may take some time of unknown value, and the response that comes back may not be available right away while your code continues to execute. So JavaScript will allow you to asynchronously run an execution, and Mongoose does this concurrently, and it's super fast and awesome. Oh no, you don't even need to preload. Don't even need to preload. This will just happen. Once you fire up your server, your API will be registered. You'll be ready to use it right away. Don't even need to preload it. You may need to warm it if you are running multiple instances of this, and you have what's called like a load balancer that basically offsets some of the cost of hitting the same server over and over and over again. But we're not concerned about any of that right now. We're just building a really simple API that does very, very simple things. But it's abstracted, so it's hard to understand it. So now we have this cool method called app.route. And route can register a URL, and you can say route, and then you can chain on your CRUD operations. So I'm going to start with new user. I'm going to say post, and I'm going to now use a controller that we haven't defined yet. Okay, our controller will be from our user controllers. Remember, this isn't defined yet. And then I'm just going to say create user. Okay, so that's all we're concerned about with this route, new user. I'm going to double check the README and make sure that's exactly what I'm doing. So yes, new user. It's got to have a new username, foo, password, or bar. And you can see we have some errors because user controller is not defined. So let's build them. Okay. So I need, in my controllers, I need the ability to start accessing some of the Mongo stuff. Okay. So we're going to import in our models. Okay. So I'm going to say const user equals, and then this is require. Remember, we're already registering this model here. Okay, so now all we need to do is require, we need to pull in what comes out of that file. And so we say this, since we're inside of controllers, we need to step outside of it, step into models, and find our user models. Okay? Now we should be able to use user whenever we need to save something to it. So, and I'm going to make sure that I have this. And then routes, and we want this create user, and then this is where we're going to import. Okay, so that's to do. All right. Okay, so create user is a function. Now, this is what's really cool about this. This function now lives on our post method at this endpoint. So because of that, we know that post takes a callback, which is exactly what we're giving it. This is going to give us our request and our response. So that's really, really cool. And we're not saying this is the only way to create this type of architecture. It is a way that I have seen people use to create this type of architecture. Okay? So now if I simply pull in, I'm going to get rid of this error right away and just say const user controllers equals require, step out, find our controllers, and pull in our user controllers. Still have requires const user controllers what am I doing here? Require. Wow, has it been that long of a day? Ah. Thanks, guys. Model. Jeez. Okay. Errors fixed. Thank you. Okay. Awesome. So now we can use this. And now if we start hitting new user with a post, so let's pull up Postman. And let's just simply, just like we have been the whole time, let's look at our request body. Okay, and we're going to say localhost 3030 new user, and let's give it a body and a password. Let's see what happens in our node server. So there we go. There's our body coming in. So now we can say const username and password equal rec.body. Okay? And then I can say const new, and you don't have to do it this way. This is just my preference. Okay?
You misspelled password.
Of course I did. Const new user equals, thanks Ty, 10 points for Gryffindor.
I'm Slytherin.
Okay, and now we can say, okay, so this is where we can pass, so we can say user, just call directly user.save and pass it the new user. So user.save user, new user. Okay, and then since .save just simply insert something into a collection, to a database, I'm just gonna simply give it a callback. Don't need much more than that. And that callback will take our error, will take our user that we created. Okay? And I'm just going to say if there is an error, we're going to assume that there's a problem. So what we, since we're validating on Mongo, since we're using our model to validate our required stuff coming through, let's take a look at the response that we get back. And so let's intentionally break this and then we'll move forward. So we'll say response.status equals 422. Response.json equals user. So we can just say, sorry, I like to do this, error inserting into users. And I'm going to put this as a lowercase users, and I can say users collection, and then give me back my full error on that JSON body. And then just say return. Okay? So now if I come here and I change something, it's going to be an empty string. So let's see what our response is. Oh, user.save, not a function. Oh, duh. Okay, I'm sorry. So I needed to say const user equals new user, and then say user, and pass this the new user, and get rid of that. Sorry about that. So it's typo. Okay, let's check it out. Check out this awesome object we got back. What's missing? We've got a password field missing. We know that right here. So if you send back your objects like this, it really helps you, you know, like if you get the raw, it's going to be kind of hard, which is what we're doing when we're JSONing it. So if you want, I mean, you could send this back, and the raw actually might already be in JSON. So let's check it out. So you're going to just have to either prettify it or whatever. But you could do something like this on all of your endpoints, just say error.message, because I'm sure there's a message piece on this. I'm going to get rid of this console log because we don't want it anymore. Okay. Yeah, so check that. Like, how sweet is that message object? That's so cool. That's the raw version of it. So if you prettify it, it's like errors inserting in a database, user validation failed, password path, password is required. Let's give it a password. And we're not doing any more sophisticated validation than that. So let's give it more, on our request, okay? So, okay, yeah, body, where are you? I could just, come on. And we're concerned with new user, post, body. I'm going to go raw, type JSON, say username, password, capitalize our P, capitalize P and a password 1. Send that up. Cannot post new user, so let's debug it. There's a bug. Let's see what the, 404 not found. Is it, I'm trying to hit 30. Thanks, Jake. Okay. So our thing is just hanging here. Oh, you know why it's hanging? Because I'm not telling it to do anything at that point. That'd be really nice if I actually told it to do something. So now it's not going to let me post this because I have a unique problem. Check it out. Error inserting, and then this is the duplicate key error. If you ever see this, it comes straight back from Mongo. It's saying blog post.users index username dupe key. Ryan Hamblin can't exist. So let's say Ryan Hamblin 1, and we should get the full entire response. Okay. Okay, so now let's check this with the client, because that's the whole reason of this sprint. You've already been doing this already. Now we need to sign up with a new account, and I'm going to say Ryan Hamblin 2, and I'm just going to give it a password. If I create it, it should allow me in. If I look at my element, I'm going to have a bunch of stuff that's still broken that I need to go implement. But if you look at your network, and so if I were to log out and go and do that again and just watch the network the whole time, so give me this. Okay. Oh, crap. Okay. You can watch the network. Oh, it changes pages, so it's hard to watch the network. I need to preserve the log, which I thought I was already doing. But yeah, you can watch network, you can preserve the log and see all of the stuff that was hit, but now it's like changing pages already, so it's sending new requests to new endpoints. This entire app, this client-side app, has a bunch of API calls sent to it. So, okay. All right. So we've definitely gone over time. I do have an engagement that I need to be like 20 minutes away from my house in 20 minutes, so I can go for another couple of minutes. And then it looks like Patrick gave us a YouTube video.
Non-stop music.
Not really
Sorry, you said Ryan Hamlin 2. I just thought of Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo.
nice. I thought maybe you were passing like some like good docs on this. So okay.
No, just some levity.
Thanks, Patrick. Okay. Oh, you were okay. So, but now as you go about and create this stuff, it should just start to work. Right now, it's all preloaded with fake data. Okay, so it's just all fake data that lives on state, and everything's broken. And you'll see in the console like what's broken. So Sean mentioned earlier that I may have something that's broken on get a single blog post. So let me check it out. So, okay, this is by the oh, you have to implement the get. So okay, this is me being bad, me being real dumb. Okay, so what I've done here is I've alluded to say you need to implement. So I should say something like error on get method to post by ID. You may want to check your create post endpoint. Sorry, that'll give you a better area to look for. Because if you're trying to implement this before you've implemented, and then this should be gone, that console log. If you see any added console logs, take them out, and then like any warnings. And then remember, I showed everyone that this should be data.data. And then you may have to look at how some other stuff is being handled. But if I come up with anything that's important, I'll let you know. There's one thing that Eli and I came to spot with, that we need this to be like an H5 here. Okay, and then all you would have to do is say author, because that's already on. If you look at your object, it should be comments.author. Oh, sorry. There should be an author here. Author of the comment. Now, where your joins are going to happen. Okay, so the second biggest part of this, after understanding the MVC architecture, is this idea of joining stuff. Okay, when we're using the populate method. Okay, so let's look at the documentation. Let me just go over this with you. It's very important that you understand what is going on here. And Sean, actually, if you look at the solution to the mini sprint, he's doing this exactly how you would be expected to do this. Okay, so so when I go and create my posts model, you don't have anything here yet. You're going to need a reference on that post to two different places. They're both going to be references that point to the same place, but they're going to exist in two different places on your post model. One of them is going to be the author of the post. So that's going to be, you're going to be able to have access to that when a post is created, because when you create a post, I'm already sending up from the client. So if I were to go and create a new post, I'm sending up from the client the user's ID that lives inside of local storage. So if you look at application and you have a user ID here, I pull this off of the user ID and I send this up. So the person who's logged in, that's who this ID belongs to, okay? So I'm sending this up along with this stuff. If I were to say, you know, this and this, well, it's not going to work right now. But if I were to show you in a console log, and I say, at the time we send up the submit post, if we just console.log our new post, so it's going to have title and content. You see I'm saving those on state. At the time I send up the author is going to be just a user ID. So you can take that user ID, which you know is going to be on that create portion. So now if I run this, you should see in the console, here is the object that's being sent up to the server. So now you're going to have to look at this object and store this user ID as the author on this post. So you just do post.save or whatever, and then your content's going to be there. But then when you go and find this post by ID, that's where you're going to use the populate method. You're going to have a reference to that author ID on your post schema. Okay? That reference will be populated at runtime, which is the best part about Mongo, because it does not go and create a whole new table and join two tables together to create all this stuff. It'll simply go and grab that collection and populate that field at runtime. And it doesn't exist anywhere in the database. All it does is give you that data back to use at your discretion as a client. That's what's so cool about it. You get this populate method, and you can basically just take it and say, I have a reference to story. Story is a schema, it's a model that exists on my database. So you see right here, they're calling mongoose.model. So person has a reference to story. So at runtime, instead of joining these tables and making it super complex and crazy to go and get this data, all it's going to do is say, where am I looking? So this is the .populate method, right? It's going to say, where am I looking? Oh, I'm looking at story. That must be a model. And look, it is. Story is there. It's a model. It's actually called lowercase stories at the time it goes and runs and grabs this stuff. And so if I need to populate this and I have a ref to story here, it's bound by an object ID that I send up. So when I create that author on the post, it's going to be an object ID that's just an ID that model actually lives in its own model. And so at runtime, when I go and call for it, I can say the story type is whatever type. So if I have this story schema, I can say populate the title and the creator and give me that full object back right here, right? So all my stories are going to be an object that have access to this stuff at runtime. That's what populate does. That's all you're doing here. And so you would have to say, if we were going for it, there's probably some documentation just down below. So if you look at where they're actually querying for it, you see they're creating this once upon a time. Okay, so story is the new story here, story.save. Okay, population. We call populate, and then it's just saying populate creator. So that's as simple as it gets, because it can just go and find that ID. Now with us, we have to populate like usernames and things like that. So because we call it username and then it's something else, but it just calls populate and then it gives exec a callback. So the reason that we're using exec here is because this populate method may take some time to actually run a process and do what it's supposed to do. Okay? So we use exec to basically return this stuff out in a promise, and that's going to be expected to be delivered at another place in time. It buys us some time to use the asynchronous code. Okay? So I'm going to be going through a solution for this. I'm going to be showing you guys what this is all about. So I want you to at least get to the point where you're creating a post. So to get this to all work, and then when you submit, it should take you back to that single post page. So it should take you to posts dot, whatever the ID is. And right now it's fake data, but it should be actual populated data. But then you'll see it says cool programmer here. That's the author name that you're concerned with at the runtime of this post query. So you're going to call find by ID and then do some stuff to populate this author name so that you don't get the ID back that exists on that field. Okay. You have the rest of tomorrow until we reconvene in the afternoon to polish this off and finish up as much about this populate as you can. This principle of like joining tables is common, like of joining collections or models or joining up your data is very common and always found in SQL. So, but they create, what you do with that is you take two tables and you create a new table that you join some of the data of those tables. This way, all you do is just give back an object at runtime, which is what's cool about it. It just happens on the fly. But you have to be thoughtful about your asynchronous operations. Cool? I'm really, really excited to show you guys a working solution for that populate stuff. But the mini sprint solution has a way for you to reference and see what to do. And if you guys continue to get stuck, just please let us know. You're welcome, Ryan. Yes, so so Patrick reminded us that you're inside of the client. So as these bugs come up, let's squash them. So I'm just going to do something that should rarely be done. Mongo tray, client, pages, single blog post, raw, edit, so I don't have to do the whole Git process. This is called lazy programming. So this needs to be, we save data.data. This line needs to go. And this needs to be an author. Patrick saves the day. And I don't have my fancy shortcuts anymore. Okay. It's committed to master, so you can go and just look at master and grab this file. You can just say raw and just copy and paste it. If there's anything else that comes up, please let me know. Or submit a pull request. So don't ever program inside of the WYSIWYG in GitHub. You just witnessed a no-no. But I did it because, yeah. Oh, thank you, Alan. Cool. Saves the Day was like my favorite band in high school, so I hope you guys build a playlist and dedicate it to Patrick. Awesome. Sorry about the bugs in the client. That's totally my bad. Blame Ty. He was my eyes at 6 in the morning on Monday morning as I was polishing it off. I worked on that.
I was also tired.
Yeah, I know. I worked on getting all like ready as I was like, you know, in a crazy weekend of fun and Eclipse events. So there's bound to be some quick bugs. But. All right, guys. Have a great evening. I'm gonna peace out, and I'm gonna just hit end meeting, and I'll get this up recorded and saved to YouTube a little bit later this evening because I got to bounce. So we'll talk to you guys soon. There's plenty of resources now for you to get this stuff, the ball rolling on. At least getting able to like log in, create a user login, and then like create posts and things like that. And then if you have anything, just feel free to DM me. I'll reach out. Cool. Take it easy.